This Bruce Lee video was banned worldwide, and once you understand why, the entire story of Bruce Lee will never look the same again, because the version of Bruce Lee most people know is not the real one. It's the safe version, the polished version, the version that fits neatly inside movie posters and martial arts documentaries. In that version, Bruce Lee is simply a legendary fighter, a fast man, a movie star, a martial arts icon who dazzled audiences, made a few groundbreaking films, and died tragically at just 32 years old. A mysterious death, a brilliant career, a short life, end of story. But that's not the real story. The real story is far more uncomfortable. Because Bruce Lee wasn't just dangerous because of his speed, or his power, or the terrifying precision of his famous one-inch punch. The most dangerous thing about Bruce Lee was his ideas. Ideas that challenged centuries of tradition. Ideas that angered powerful institutions. Ideas that exposed how deeply racism and control were embedded in Hollywood, the martial arts world, and even the cultures he came from. Bruce Lee was not simply a fighter. He was a revolutionary thinker. And revolutions make powerful people nervous. For decades, parts of his story have been softened, reshaped, and quietly pushed out of view, not through secret conspiracies or shadowy assassins hiding in the dark, but through something much simpler: silence. The uncomfortable parts weren't discussed, the confrontations weren't highlighted. The philosophy that threatened entire systems was reduced to inspirational quotes on posters. "Be water, my friend." But Bruce Lee wasn't talking about calm wisdom for Instagram captions. He was talking about destroying rigid systems, and the systems he challenged did not appreciate it. So today we're going to pull the real story back into the light. Not rumors, not myths, not internet conspiracy theories. Everything you're about to hear is built from documented history, verified biographies, eyewitness accounts, and records from the people who actually knew him. Some of it will inspire you, some of it will frustrate you, and some of it will make you realize why a story like this might make certain people very uncomfortable. Because to understand Bruce Lee, you have to go back to the beginning, not to the movie star, but to the boy who was born between two worlds and belonged to neither. Before Bruce Lee became a global icon, he was a child who didn't quite belong anywhere, and that tension would shape everything he later became. Bruce Lee was born on November 27, 1940, in San Francisco's Chinatown. It happened during what Chinese tradition calls the Hour of the Dragon, a time believed to bring strength, ambition, and unpredictable destiny. His father, Li Hoi Chuen, was one of the most famous Cantonese opera performers in Hong Kong. His mother, Grace Ho, came from a wealthy Eurasian family with both Chinese and European ancestry. That mixed heritage would quietly follow Bruce for the rest of his life. To the Western world, he was Chinese. But to some traditional Chinese communities, he wasn't fully Chinese either. From the very beginning, Bruce Lee lived between two identities. His parents named him Li Junfan, meaning return again. It was almost prophetic, as if the family somehow sensed that their son would spend his life moving back and forth between cultures, never fully accepted by either one. Soon after his birth, the family returned to Hong Kong, and the world Bruce grew up in was anything but peaceful. Japan invaded Hong Kong when Bruce was still a child. The city lived under occupation for years. Military planes flew overhead. Soldiers patrolled the streets. Tension filled the air. These were Bruce Lee's earliest memories. But even as a boy, he showed something unusual. Family stories describe a tiny Bruce Lee standing in the street, shaking his fist at the Japanese planes flying above the city, a small act of defiance from a child who already seemed wired differently. By the time he was 6 years old, Bruce was already acting in films thanks to his father's connections in the Hong Kong movie industry. Most people don't realize this, but Bruce Lee didn't start as a martial arts star. He started as a child actor. By the time he turned 18, he had appeared in more than 20 movies. But outside of film sets, another side of Bruce was developing. He had a quick temper, a restless energy, a constant need to prove himself. Hong Kong in the 1950s was full of street gangs, and teenage Bruce found himself drawn into that environment. Fights became common. Alley fights, rooftop fights, schoolyard confrontations. Eventually, one brutal beating changed everything. At just 13 years old, after being badly defeated in a street fight, Bruce Lee asked his mother for permission to learn kung fu. That decision would introduce him to a teacher who would change his life forever. A quiet, highly respected martial arts master named Yip Man. And once Bruce Lee walked into that training hall, nothing about martial arts would ever be the same again. Bruce Lee's martial arts journey almost never started. In fact, when he first tried to join the school that would shape his future, he was nearly turned away. The master he approached was Yip Man, the Grand Master of a fighting system called Wing Chun, a highly efficient close-range martial art built on speed, precision, and relentless pressure. Yip Man was respected across Hong Kong. His school trained some of the most disciplined fighters in the city. But when Bruce Lee arrived, there was a problem, a serious one. Because many of the senior students discovered something about Bruce's background that they strongly objected to. Bruce Lee was part European through his mother's side, and at the time, some traditional kung fu schools believed martial arts knowledge should only be taught to people who were fully Chinese. To them, Bruce Lee was an outsider. Several students refused to train with him. Some openly protested his presence. For a moment, it looked like the door to the martial arts world would close before Bruce Lee even stepped inside. But Yip Man saw something in the young teenager that others didn't. Focus, intensity, a kind of relentless curiosity. So the master made a quiet decision. He allowed Bruce Lee to stay. And in many cases, Yip Man trained him personally. For the next 5 years, Bruce Lee immersed himself in Wing Chun training. Endless drills, hours of stance work, speed training, chain punches repeated until the arms felt like fire. But Bruce Lee was not the type of student who blindly accepted rules. Even as a teenager, he constantly questioned things. Why was a movement done a certain way? Could it be faster? Could it be simpler? Could it be more direct? This habit quietly irritated some traditionalists, but it revealed something about Bruce Lee's mind. He wasn't just learning martial arts, he was studying combat itself. Outside the school, the street fights didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. Bruce Lee gained a reputation in Hong Kong for being extremely quick to challenge anyone who crossed him. Teachers complained. Police warnings started appearing. One particular fight in 1958, where Bruce defeated a rival martial arts student so decisively that authorities became involved, forced his parents to make a difficult decision. They feared their son's temper would eventually land him in serious trouble. So Bruce Lee's father did something drastic. He sent his 18-year-old son to America with almost no money, no clear plan, and no idea that this decision would eventually change global martial arts forever. because once Bruce Lee arrived in the United States, the real story was only beginning. When Bruce Lee arrived in America in 1959, he carried only a small suitcase and roughly $100 in his pocket. He was 18 years old. No fame, no connections, no safety net. But what he did have was absolute confidence in one thing: his ability to fight. Bruce first settled in Seattle, where he worked small jobs while finishing his education. But very quickly he began doing something that would attract attention and, eventually, controversy. He started teaching martial arts. At the time, this was already unusual, but what truly shocked people was who he was teaching. Bruce Lee taught anyone who wanted to learn. White students, black students, Asian students, anyone. To Bruce, martial arts were not cultural property. They were knowledge. But to many traditionalists, especially within parts of the Chinese martial arts community in America, this was seen as a betrayal. Kung Fu, they believed, should remain inside the Chinese community. Bruce Lee disagreed completely, and his refusal to follow that rule began attracting challengers. Young martial artists started showing up at his demonstrations, eager to prove that the small, fast Chinese instructor couldn't possibly be as good as people claimed. One early confrontation became legendary among Bruce's students. During a demonstration in Seattle, a trained martial artist, reportedly a black belt in karate, challenged Bruce Lee in front of the audience. The challenger threw the first attack, a powerful kick aimed directly at Bruce. Bruce moved instantly. He deflected the strike, stepped forward, and unleashed a rapid chain of punches that drove the challenger backward across the room before he even had time to react. Within seconds, the fight was over. Witnesses later said the challenger collapsed unconscious against the wall. Bruce Lee didn't celebrate. He didn't boast. According to several students present, he simply adjusted his stance, looked around the room calmly, and continued teaching. That moment revealed something important. Bruce Lee wasn't interested in proving himself to crowds. He fought for one reason only: to answer challenges, and once the answer was clear, he moved on. But these confrontations began spreading stories. Stories about a 130-pound fighter who could drop trained martial artists in seconds. Stories about speed that people described as almost impossible to see. And eventually, those stories reached a group of traditional kung fu masters who believed Bruce Lee had crossed a line that could not be ignored. A formal challenge was coming, and the fight that followed would change Bruce Lee's entire philosophy of martial arts forever. The challenge arrived quietly. No cameras, no audience, no publicity. Just a message delivered to Bruce Lee's school in Oakland, California. And the meaning behind it was clear. Stop teaching Kung Fu to non-Chinese students, or prove you deserve to keep doing it. At the center of this confrontation was a martial artist named Yip Man, a respected practitioner connected to the traditional Kung Fu community in San Francisco. The rules of the fight were simple: no weapons, no interruptions. One man leaves the room victorious. The fight took place inside Bruce Lee's school in 1964. Only a handful of people were present, including Bruce's wife, Linda Lee. And according to most witness accounts, the moment the fight began, Bruce attacked immediately. There was no ritual, no circling, no traditional testing of distance. Bruce exploded forward. Yip Man reportedly tried to create space, backing away across the room while Bruce chased him relentlessly with punches and kicks. The fight lasted several minutes. Eventually, Bruce forced his opponent to the ground and demanded that he surrender. Wong Jack Man conceded. Technically, Bruce Lee had won. But when the fight ended, something unexpected happened. Bruce Lee was furious, not at his opponent, at himself. He believed the fight had taken far too long. In Bruce's mind, a real confrontation should be decided in seconds. Efficiency, directness, no wasted motion. But during this fight, Bruce had become out of breath. His movements had slowed, the techniques worked, but they weren't perfect. That realization bothered him deeply. So Bruce Lee did something that shocked many traditional martial artists. He began questioning everything he had been taught. Was Wing Chun enough? Were traditional styles actually limiting fighters? Was martial arts tradition more about preserving systems than creating effective combat? Bruce began studying other disciplines: boxing, wrestling, fencing, judo. He analyzed fighters like Muhammad Ali, studying footwork and timing frame by frame. And slowly, Bruce Lee began developing something entirely new, a philosophy of combat that rejected fixed styles altogether. He called it Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, not a style, not a system, but an idea. And that idea was about to challenge the entire martial arts world. Just as Bruce Lee was redefining martial arts, another battle was unfolding. This one wasn't inside training halls, it was inside Hollywood. In 1964, Bruce Lee was invited to perform a martial arts demonstration at the Long Beach International Karate Championships, organized by martial arts pioneer Ed Parker. What happened on that stage stunned everyone in the audience. Bruce demonstrated techniques most people had never seen before. The one-inch punch, delivering explosive force from almost no distance. The two-finger push-ups, showing unbelievable strength and control. And most shocking of all, his punching speed. His hands moved so quickly that spectators swore they couldn't follow the motion. Among the people watching was a Hollywood hairstylist named Jay Sebring, a friend of television producer William Dozier. Sebring showed Dozier footage of Bruce Lee's performance. Dozier immediately saw something, a presence, a charisma that cameras loved. So Bruce Lee was invited to Hollywood for a screen test. The role he was offered was Kato, the masked sidekick in a new television series called The Green Hornet. Bruce accepted, but he made one thing very clear. He refused to play the kind of Asian stereotypes that Hollywood had been producing for decades. No exaggerated accents, no submissive servant roles, no cartoonish martial arts caricatures. Bruce insisted that Kato be portrayed as strong, intelligent, and capable. To his surprise, the producers agreed. When The Green Hornet aired in 1966, audiences immediately noticed something unusual. Every time Bruce Lee appeared on screen, he stole the scene. His fight sequences looked nothing like the staged combat viewers were used to seeing. They looked real. But despite the attention Bruce was getting, the show lasted only one season. And after it ended, something frustrating happened. Hollywood didn't know what to do with him. Studio executives believed American audiences wouldn't accept an Asian man as the lead of a major action series. Bruce Lee was offered small roles, guest appearances, supporting characters, but never the main star. At one point, Bruce even auditioned for a television series about a wandering Shaolin monk called Kung Fu. The role eventually went to David Carradine, a white actor with no martial arts experience at the time. Bruce Lee later acknowledged the disappointment publicly. Hollywood, it seemed, had decided exactly where he belonged, but what they didn't realize was that Bruce Lee was about to prove them completely wrong, and he was going to do it outside of America. When Bruce Lee returned to Hong Kong in 1970, he wasn't arriving as a conquering hero. In his mind, he had just spent nearly a decade fighting for opportunities in America and losing. Hollywood had admired his talent, but it had never trusted him with the spotlight. So Bruce went back to Hong Kong with something close to frustration. What he didn't realize was that the situation waiting for him there was completely different, because while he had been struggling in America, something unexpected had happened. The Green Hornet had been airing in Hong Kong, but the show wasn't marketed as the Green Hornet. It was broadcast under a different name, The Kato Show. To audiences in Hong Kong, Bruce Lee wasn't the sidekick, he was the star. People recognized him immediately when he walked through the streets. Crowds gathered around him. Fans followed him everywhere, and one man paying very close attention was film producer Raymond Chow. Chow had recently founded a new studio called Golden Harvest, which was trying to compete with the powerful Shaw Brothers film empire dominating Hong Kong cinema. Chow believed Bruce Lee could become something the industry had never seen before, a global martial arts superstar. So he offered Bruce the lead role in a film called The Big Boss. The budget was small. The filming conditions in Thailand were harsh, but Bruce accepted the offer, and when the movie was released in 1971, something extraordinary happened. The film shattered Hong Kong box office records. Lines wrapped around city blocks. Theaters stayed packed for weeks. Audiences had never seen action filmed like this before. Bruce Lee wasn't pretending to fight. He looked like a real fighter who had somehow walked into a movie set. Golden Harvest immediately rushed a second film into production, Fist of Fury, and unbelievably, it broke the record set by the first movie. Then Bruce pushed even further. He wrote, directed, and starred in The Way of the Dragon, staging one of the most iconic fight scenes in movie history, his legendary battle with Chuck Norris inside the Roman Colosseum. 3 films, 3 massive successes. Suddenly, Hollywood was paying attention again. This time, they weren't offering Bruce Lee a supporting role. They wanted him to lead a movie. The film was called Enter the Dragon. It would become the most important martial arts movie ever made. But Bruce Lee would never see its success, because just weeks before the premiere, something tragic happened. And to this day, the exact reason is still debated. Bruce Lee was 32 years old when the world lost him, and the day it happened still raises questions even today. It was July 20th, 1973, one of the hottest days that summer in Hong Kong. Bruce had spent the afternoon meeting with his producer Raymond Chow, discussing future film projects. Everything in his career was finally coming together. Enter the Dragon was finished. Hollywood was preparing its release. Bruce Lee was about to become a global superstar. Later that day, Bruce went to the apartment of actress Betty Ting Pei. While there, he reportedly complained about having a severe headache. She offered him a common painkiller called Equagesic, a medication containing aspirin and a muscle relaxant. Bruce had taken similar medication before, without any problem. After taking the tablet, he laid down to rest. Hours passed. When Betty tried to wake him, he didn't respond. An ambulance was called immediately. Bruce Lee was rushed to the hospital. Doctors attempted to revive him, but it was already too late. He was pronounced dead later that evening. The official cause of death was cerebral edema, swelling of the brain. But what triggered it remains debated even decades later. The official investigation suggested a rare reaction to the medication he had taken. However, medical researchers later raised other possible explanations. One theory points to heat stroke, since Hong Kong temperatures that day were extreme and Bruce had been physically active. Another possibility discussed by modern researchers involves water intoxication, where excessive fluid consumption can disrupt the body's electrolyte balance and lead to dangerous swelling in the brain. What is important to understand is this: despite decades of rumors and internet myths, no credible evidence has ever supported assassination theories. No secret societies, no hidden poison, just a tragic combination of medical factors that may have overwhelmed even a body as extraordinary as Bruce Lee's. But the shock of his death was enormous, because Bruce Lee died just weeks before the release of Enter the Dragon, the film that would make him a worldwide icon, the film that would prove Hollywood wrong, and the film that would turn Bruce Lee into a legend almost overnight, a legend who never got to see the full impact of what he had created. Bruce Lee died before the world truly understood what he had started, but what happened after his death proved something remarkable. His ideas didn't disappear. They spread, faster than anyone expected, when Enter the Dragon was released in August 1973, just weeks after Bruce Lee's death. The impact was immediate and global. Audiences across America, Europe, and Asia flooded theaters. For many viewers, this was the first time they had ever seen an Asian actor leading a major Hollywood action film. And Bruce Lee didn't look like the stereotypes Hollywood had been showing for decades. He wasn't submissive. He wasn't comic relief. He wasn't a background character. He was powerful, confident, intelligent, and completely in control of every scene he appeared in. The film became one of the most successful martial arts movies ever made. But Bruce Lee's influence didn't stop with cinema. His philosophy about martial arts, the rejection of rigid styles, quietly reshaped the entire fighting world. Decades later, fighters and coaches began realizing something surprising. Bruce Lee had predicted the future of combat sports. His idea that fighters should combine techniques from multiple disciplines became the foundation of what we now call mixed martial arts. In fact, Dana White, president of the UFC, publicly referred to Bruce Lee as the father of MMA. Modern champions across multiple combat sports have credited him as inspiration. Fighters like Georges St. Anderson Silva, and John Jones have all spoken about studying Bruce Lee's philosophy. Because what Bruce Lee was teaching in the 1960s, absorbing what works and discarding what doesn't, is exactly how elite fighters train today. But his impact went even further than fighting. Bruce Lee became a symbol of challenging limits, a symbol of refusing to accept the roles society tries to assign. And his famous words, "Be water, my friend," were never meant as a poetic slogan. They were a philosophy about adaptability, about breaking through barriers, about refusing to be trapped by systems that try to define you. And over time, something fascinating happened. The ideas Bruce Lee struggled to share during his lifetime became impossible to suppress, because once people truly understood them, they realized Bruce Lee had never just been a martial artist. He had been teaching something much bigger. More than 50 years after his death, Bruce Lee is still everywhere. His image appears on murals across the world. Statues of him stand in Hong Kong, Bosnia, and cities across Asia. Video games, movies, athletes, and entire fighting systems still carry his influence. But the most important part of Bruce Lee's legacy is not his punches or his movies. It's the idea he represented, because Bruce Lee spent his entire life refusing to accept the limitations others placed on him, Hollywood tried to confine him to stereotypes. Traditional martial arts communities tried to confine him to rigid styles. Society tried to confine him to racial categories that defined what he was allowed to become. Bruce rejected all of it. He believed something radical for his time. That ability mattered more than tradition. That truth mattered more than hierarchy. And that individuals should never allow institutions to define their potential. That mindset made Bruce Lee deeply inspiring, but it also made him disruptive. Because systems built on tradition and control rarely welcome people who challenge them openly. Bruce Lee didn't just challenge them, he proved them wrong. When Hollywood refused to give him leading roles, he went to Hong Kong and became the biggest action star in Asia. When martial arts masters insisted that styles should never change, he created a philosophy built on constant evolution. And when people said certain barriers could not be crossed, Bruce Lee crossed them anyway. That's why his story still resonates today. Not because he was unbeatable, not because he was perfect, but because he showed something powerful about human potential. Limits are often illusions, and the systems that enforce them can be broken. Bruce Lee once said something that perfectly captures how he approached life. Using no way as way, having no limitation as limitation. It wasn't just martial arts advice. It was a blueprint for living. And that is the real reason Bruce Lee's story continues to matter. Because even decades later, the message he carried is still finding its way through every crack in the walls that tried to contain it, just like water.